Okay, well, thank you for coming along. Yeah, my name's John. I actually work at Abney Park. I've been there for about 7 years now. I started out as a volunteer, having moved to Stoke Newington, and just fell completely in love with Abney Park and just wanted to be involved. And within a few months, I was given a set of keys, and here I am today. So yeah, I just wanted really just to, I suppose, pass on some of my knowledge, I suppose, of bits and pieces that I've picked up over the time of working at Abney Park. I meet so many interesting people. They're specialists and just enthusiasts and various other people. So it's just a good opportunity really just to talk about that as well. So yeah, I'll start off. So hang on.
Down?
Or down. Oh no, it was
yep.
Too long. Okay, so as you may know, we are part of what's called the Magnificent Seven. I suppose sort of from about mid-1830s to about mid-1840s, they opened up these 7 cemeteries in London. There was a bit of a population boom going on at the time, probably about, I don't know, the population of London doubled within about 15 years or so, and so they needed these grounds really to bury the dead. And as you can see, it's also what's called, I suppose now, the capital ring. There's sort of this circular aspect to where they place these cemeteries. Abney Park itself opened in May 20th, 1840. There's 2 things really. One is a nonconformist cemetery. Basically anyone that's not Church of England was buried at Abney. Stoke Newington is a bit of a hotbed, I suppose, for dissidents, free thinkers, radicals, these kind of people. Still is to this day, really, and so they wanted to, so it sort of mirrored its location in that regard. It was also created as a garden cemetery, an arboretum, the largest of its kind at the time, designed by a gentleman called George Lodges, who was based here in Hackney, sort of the epicentre really of horticulture, and they were bringing in a lot of plants and trees and various things from around the world into Hackney at the time, and Abney was in some ways used as a breeding ground really for a lot of these plants, in particular the trees. They planted approximately 1,000 trees on site. We think A to Z in Latin, we're not quite sure, but they certainly didn't take into account the soil or sort of where to plant these trees. It was more sort of maybe about the aesthetics. About 20 or so survive today, some of which are quite rare. Let's just... So yeah, here we see, I suppose, a modern day picture really of Abney, and as you can see, it's a pretty amazing oasis really of trees, a chapel there in the middle, and obviously looks very different now to what it did back then. Very landscaped and sort of ornate. There was this period really in the 1970s where it was left abandoned. It was the company went into administration, and Borough bought it off them for £1, and then left abandoned really, and that's why it then became so overgrown in the way that it is now. Sort of a grid map really of Abney. We actually use this a lot for our burials as well. In regards to grave searches, we're very fortunate that we have the burial records pretty much of everyone that's there. There are some gaps. And so we use this really in a sense of how to find people. So each individual one, say C4, C5, we've got the individual plot maps, and so within that you can then sort of find various people. Everyone there has a burial number. First person to be buried in the plot, they then their burial number becomes the plot number, and then that's how we then find people. They decided to renumber as well in about 1913 for some reason, so everything started, you have to take 110,000 off the original number in order to get the renumbered number. But and again, sort of get a sense of the sort of the layout. A lot of these paths are actually sort of original paths. Great Elm Walk there, you'll see sort of an old picture, and you'll see an element of the actual elms that were there originally before the cemetery opened. Here we have Abney House. Front door, I don't know if this is the door facing Church Street or maybe into the cemetery itself, but anyway, the door itself is located exactly where our one and only mausoleum is, Dr. Rogers' mausoleum. Abney's not really famed for its architecture, I suppose. I mean, there's some beautiful sculptures, these kind of things. Other places like Highgate, Nunhead, very much into their sort of architectural sort of glory. Abney wasn't quite like that. It was designed as this garden cemetery, very unassuming. It was this early Victorian idea of a place for leisure, recreation, education, with these sort of early ideals really for what this for what Abney should be, and certainly something that we try and follow on to this day. There we are. There's Sir Thomas Abney. Co-founder of the Bank of England. He was also Lord Mayor of London for a while, and obviously resided there at Abney. And then it was actually knocked down in 1843. The Abney family moved out and was pretty much left abandoned, and so the mayor came across this wonderful poster here of them sort of selling the fixtures and things like that as well. And so as you can see, so there's sort of wonderful sort of landscape really of Abney, and then suddenly you get these little graves sort of just popping up in various positions. I think possibly that one over there, because the very first burial at Abney Park was June the 3rd, 1840. A gentleman called Reverend James Mather, a missionary. I think that may even be his grave there. It's a sort of a wonderful sort of sarcophagus. And probably no, well actually I'll talk about that maybe in the comment. And you'll see there the Great Elm Walk. So this was part of the original landscape. Lady Mary was very much into landscape gardening, and she had designed the sort of the private gardens, which were then sort of taken over and incorporated into the cemetery. You'll also notice as well, just in front of the chapel, catacombs. There are catacombs in Abney, which are underneath the war memorial that is there. And if you do see the war memorial, between the steps themselves, you see an arch, and that's where the arch of the original door that led into the catacombs were. Catacombs basically these underground vaults. They had about 140 graves in there, or sort of coffins sort of lined up on the wall. The idea was that I suppose families could hold vigils next to the actual coffins themselves. There was a lot of particular practices really on how to grieve back then as well. Front entrance leading into Abney. I mean, it's still in some ways sort of looks fairly similar. The path itself leading up to the chapel Ride. You've got New Ride, and then the Church Street entrance as well. The big King monument there as well. That's placed there. But you'll notice these sort of circular beds. They planted as well about 1,500 or so rosariums on site as well. And I don't think any of the original sort of plants in the centre there. We still get a lot of roses growing there, but instead about 20 of the original trees, there's an old spotted hawthorn, American spotted hawthorn. There's only 2 of those in London. And the gates as well to Abney. Early sort of practice as well of sort of the Egyptian style, the Egyptology brought into sort of funerary architecture. And I quote, these were seen as African architecture gone too far when they were first installed. They were actually ridiculed as well by Pugin. Pugin did a wonderful sketch of incorporating these gates with the sort of banner saying non-conformism and things as well. So and actually on the pillars themselves there's some Egyptian lilies. There's these arches as well that mirror the arches of the chapel. Designed by William Hoskins, who also designed the chapel as well. There were toilets as well, public toilets just over there as well. Again, the gates sort of leading in. And there's Dr. Rogers' mausoleum where the front door was, and very much these wonderful sort of old photos as well. You really get a sort of a sense of, sometimes you can sort of piece these photos together and sort of get an idea as to when sort of the graves came about and things, and also the sort of vista that they wanted to sort of have that led towards the chapel as well. Professor of Architecture at King's College. It was actually the tallest spire in Hackney in its day. And it was a sort of a London yellow brick with these sort of rosary windows on each of the four compass points as well. And actually in the turrets there's still the remnants of these old stairwells. There was a sort of internal sort of spiral stairwell that led up, and at the bottom of the turret you could actually walk out of that along the side of the roof, and there was actually a doorway that led into the chapel as well. And supposedly the chaplain actually used to do his sort of sermons stood up on the gallery there, where for those of you who have sort of maybe recently been to Abney, you notice it's all been sort of stabilised now. It's all been worked on. It caught fire in the 70s during its sort of wilderness years, and has recently been stabilised, and it will be restored, and we're hoping to sort of use it a lot more for sort of multifunctional venue spaces and things like that as well. But we do get some wonderful photos coming in of the chapel. We actually don't have any photos whatsoever. Maybe this could be one of your projects of what it was like inside, which is a real shame. We have some architectural drawings, but nothing concrete really, photographs. We have a lot of the people that come in who visit the older generation who still have some loved ones buried there, and we often ask them, and we get some ideas from them as to what it was like inside, but we don't have anything, unfortunately, to go with. And so, also as well, I'd like to talk about some of the people that are buried at Abney as well. So we've got some, sort of their positions really on them. I'll talk a little bit individually about them as well. But as I said, we are very fortunate that we have the burial records. We also get a lot of people looking for ancestors. We do a lot of grave searches throughout the week. People from Australia, America, all around the world coming in looking for ancestors, and from that as well we can get some wonderful information. We find out that we've got inventors. There's a gentleman, Edward Tan, who invented time lock and fireproof safes, who first worked with Mr. Chubb, who made the locks initially, and a gentleman called Benjamin Jenkins as well, who travelled the world with the largest female mandolin orchestra. That's his claim to fame. So, Isaac Watts, a monument here to Isaac Watts. He actually, I suppose, resided initially at Fleetwood House. He then became good friends with the Abneys, and he actually initially stayed there for a week, ended up staying 36 years. He basically just fell in love with them, and so this is really to commemorate his time spent at Abney. He's actually buried at Bun Hill Fields, another nonconformist cemetery which became full, and then Abney came about. So this is really just to commemorate his time here. He is known as the father of English hymnody. He wrote over 750 hymns, one of which was actually about flatulence. But he was actually quite controversial as well. He used to take the Psalms out of the Bible and rewrite them into couplets and various things like that as well, and seen as very controversial in his day. There's also a place called Isaac Watts's Mound. Maybe we'll see it on there's a later picture, I think, or maybe the next one as well. Just up in the top corner there, Isaac Watts's Mound. This was also known as Heronry Island. There was Hackney Brook, a canal that ran through the grounds in the day that segregated the main grounds to this little island up in the top there. And that's pretty much where he wrote a lot of hymns. He used to take his time out and sort of relax there and think. And this is kind of what it looks like now, really. It's almost as it was back then in some ways, in its sort of shape and structure. One of the few areas in Abney that there's no actual burials. There were other designated areas, but the company that went into administration in the 70s were doing some dodgy burials, it seems. Just to say very quickly as well, Isaac Watts was actually apparently quite an ugly man. He very bulbous features, these kind of things, and there's actually quite a lot of monuments and busts of him around the country. And he always asked to be draped to make him sort of look a lot more in proportion and things. But anyway, we also have Margaret Graham as well, known as England's first female aeronaut. She basically made and flew her own hot air balloons over the skies of London and beyond with her husband, whom she married at 16. Marks and Spencer's on Oxford Street is pretty much where their manufacturing business was, and they were using Mare Street and various other local areas really as their takeoff. And there's a few records really of her flights, not very successful, but kind of the classic kind of crashing into spires and treetops and things like that as well. I think we got one. Yeah, so so yes, so she certainly sort of played on her idea, on the whole thing of crashes. There's a wonderful story actually with the Duke of Brunswick, who claims to be a lot braver, but basically the balloon was descending and then sort of shot up for whatever reason. He jumped out. She then hung on for dear life. And about sort of 100 feet or so fell off, broke, I believe, both her ankles, her wrist, collarbone, but within a few days she was back up in the air balloon and going strong as well. As you can see, she died in her bed as well. So, she was also asked as well by for Queen Victoria's coronation as well to fly her hot air balloon. This was sort of seen as in some ways, I suppose, the emergence of women within society, the powers of the sky, these kind of things as well. But it all went horribly wrong again. She crashed into this mansion, wonderful sort of artist's sketch. I don't know if people are running to it from it, I'm not quite sure. But anyway, and this was actually seen as an omen on Queen Victoria's reign, but she lasted quite a while as well. So. We also have a lady called Betsi Cadwaladr. This actually came about really from some Welsh nurses that approached us about 5-6 years ago now, asking about Betsi. We didn't know too much really about her, and she's actually buried in what's called a pauper's grave. We have quite a lot of these on site. Common grave, public graves, you have private, public graves, these kind of things. Pauper's graves kind of a sort of a mass pit really, up to about 5 to 30 people. They used to do what's called batch them up, wait until X amount of people had passed away and then sort of bring them in one day and bury them. And unfortunately she was put into a pauper's grave, so we don't actually know exactly where she is. They just did not make a record really of where a lot of these graves are. We are, I should just say as well, we are doing a project at the moment called Abney Unearthed, which is basically remapping the site. There's a lot of gaps in our records and our plot maps every Tuesday. People are more than welcome to come along and volunteer. We're also looking for researchers, these kind of things as well. So anyway, Betsi was in one of those, but she was actually in the Crimean War. She actually worked alongside Florence Nightingale as well. When they first met, they did not get on very well at all. Florence from a very aristocratic background, Betsi from a sort of this poor Welsh sort of little village. In Florence's own words, she found the Welsh language uncouth, and so they didn't get on particularly well. But over time, they worked very closely with each other, and there's quite a lot of records, really, obviously of Florence, but of Betsi's work out there. It is rumoured as well that Betsi was actually the lady of the lamp, not Florence. But anyway, that's probably know about our Abney lion as well, the marble lion that's there. It's wonderful, wonderful sort of marble sculpture, which is has quite a few of the family members, but there is also a gentleman called Frank C. Bostock, Frank C. Bostock, known as the Animal King, a menagerist, travelling circus. Basically, he travelled the world really with his entourage of animals, and he was also a lion tamer. He loved his lions. He claimed to have these sort of superhuman abilities, sort of healing abilities, that he would be sort of bitten, scratched, and then miraculously healed overnight, and these kind of things as well. And he also actually kept his giraffes on Yokeley Road. That was his giraffe house there. A wonderful photo there of him and his lions. He also did sort of picnics as well. He set up a picnic, ate his jam sandwiches, smoked his pipe whilst his lions sort of roamed around him. This is the lion itself, and there he is with looks probably like a stuffed tiger, I think. Maybe. Lion. He also wrote a book as well on how to tame wild animals. He was also very much into sort of animal welfare as well. These sort of bringing these exotic animals onto our shores, travelling, this kind of thing as well. They probably weren't lasting too well, and so he was looking into animal welfare. But on the other flip side of that as well, it was sort of boxing kangaroos, dancing bears, this kind of stuff as well, unfortunately. There is a lion as well in Highgate Cemetery. I think the first name was Henry, but the surname is Wombwell, and that was Frank's grandfather. That's how he got into the trade. I personally think our lions are a lot nicer than theirs, yes. And just to kind of say, you probably can't see it too well on here, but just written on here, it says Millward opposite cemetery. That's the name of the sculpturer. I always think it's a wonderful way to advertise the work you do. But Millward opposite cemetery. He was sort of based up around Church Street, opposite there. Also as well, Dunkley, opposite the main entrance. Probably see some of these old photos of Abney, and you'll see Dunkley and Sons, or Dunkley and Co, sort of stonemasons, that kind of, are sort of based sort of on there as well. Whilst we're sort of looking at this, I sort of do tours during the month as well, and I always sort of take this opportunity as well to sort of maybe just talk a little bit about I have time, just a little bit about how you actually get somebody into the ground as well. I mean, it's all quite intriguing, but this one here, you would have a very long hockey stick with almost a little curve on it, which you would then put underneath the stone itself. Forces come along and then drag the whole thing off as well to sort of reveal the ground. I mean, it was a sign of affluence, but it also, especially in the earlier days, was actually seen as a means of stopping grave robbers as well, by putting a great big piece of stone on your grave would stop a lot of that as well. There's a headstone just to the left as well there as well, a wonderful sort of Masonic symbol on there. You see all these kind of symbolism on headstones are just fascinating areas, and that's sort of maybe a whole talk there as well. I have also, slightly off, I have also heard as well that by 2064 there'll be more dead people on Facebook than alive. And PC Tyler, he's right near to Isaac Watts' monument, and there was a couple of Latvians, I suppose, anarchists who had been casing a factory, the wage van going in and out of this factory, and on this particular Saturday, 23rd of January 1999, I believe, they decided to hijack it. £80 worth of money was in there, and it all went pretty much terribly wrong, really. They ended up having this chase through the back streets of Tottenham all the way up to Leigh Valley. There's actually a board game of this as well. Somebody gave it to us in the office, like a role-playing game. I'm very much into role-playing games, but I'm not quite sure if I really want to play this one. It's actually the Latvians as well actually hijacked an ice cream van or float as well. It was all horse-drawn, and the brakes are on apparently. So they're going about 3 or 4 miles an hour. Wonderful sort of tales of the chase itself. But unfortunately, there were fatalities. 25 people were shot and were injured, and 2 people actually were fatally injured. One of whom, PC Tyler, I think believed to be the first policeman to have died from shot wounds on our shores as well. And just behind his grave is a little boy called Ralph. And he also died on the day as well. He was only about 10. His mother actually kept his shoes and was buried about 50 years later with his shoes as well. And this was then later known as the Tottenham Outrage, sort of this uprising of anarchists, and also then led further afield as well into the Russian Revolution and things. This is the actual funeral procession and the monument itself, one of our listed monuments. We have about 13 or so of those. You'll also very quickly see the sort of the black ostrich feathers, the sort of regalia that was used as well in mourning practice. They usually have mourning shops dotted around the area as well, where you could go in and buy accessories and things as well. And you also actually had professional mourners, people that were paid to go to funerals to bump up the numbers. A policeman's helmet as well. It's a recent addition. And, going over time slightly, is that okay? Okay,
5 minutes.
okay, cool. We also have a hangman buried at Abney as well. On our records, his name was changed to Calcraft. They changed the name so that people wouldn't come and find and desecrate the grave and things. But William Calcraft, Britain's most notorious, or most prolific hangman, 45 years in service, 450 hangings, £10 hanging, £5 of it was a reprieve. He also made money from selling clothes, the rope, money from old rope, that's where the term came from. Yeah, thousands of people came along to watch these things as well, and he was not in favour of what's called the long drop, where they had the length of the rope with the weight of the body to make things quicker. Again, he would then get paid to literally jump on shoulders, pull on legs, these kind of things. We actually had a young man visit about 4 years ago with his band, a metal band called Amulet, and they wrote a song called The Executioner, and they wanted a band photo around the grave. So he was an ancestor, one of the guys that was related to Calcraft. Yes, scenes in the life of Calcraft the hangman. Yes. He also invented a belt as well, Calcraft belt. And probably what would maybe say our most famous burial, really, William Booth, founder of the Salvation Army. I suppose in those days the churches waited for the poor to come to them. They took it upon themselves to go out to the poor to sort of help as well. Also with alcoholics and things like this as well. They did a lot of work in that field. Catherine Booth as well, his wife, very much into women's rights. In her own words, she wanted to elevate women to man's status. Lord Shaftesbury actually called her the Antichrist for what she was trying to do. Yes, about 100,000 people or so passed his casket as well. About 80,000 people or so lined the streets of London leading up to Abney. They actually had about 10,000 people inside Abney for the actual funeral itself. We'll see some of the processions going through as well. Yeah. Again. So Abney's just on the left there, I believe. So, wonderful sort of panoramic photo as well of Churchill. You see the Dunkley on there as well. We have this in our office if people want to sort of have a look at it a bit further, but you see so much detail in there as well. So this was in Abney. They erected a stage, and and I always like to finish off on this quote as well. If you don't mind, I'll just quickly read it out. England, above all other lands, is celebrated for the respect which he pays to her distinguished dead. The country churches and churchyards of England are the most beautiful in the world, and the influence of such places is chastening to the soul in this harsh world of ours, and I think it's still pretty relevant to today. This was written in 1852, an American who came to visit Abney. I will just say as well, it is all about the balance of a memorial park and a listed nature reserve. There's this balance between a memorial park and nature reserve and a public space is what we try and achieve. Sometimes one outweighs the other. This time of year, nature really does take hold, but we try our best to achieve that, and hopefully it's working. And we just want people to enjoy the space and for a lot more years to come as well. So anyway, thank you very much.